Well, now that I'm retired, I have some time on my hands, and I'm starting a new project. It's going to be a project that's designed to give me the opportunity to kind of review my 39 plus years in high schools. I'll even go back and maybe have some stories from my time as a high school student as well. Three numbers that are kind of key are 7, 39, and 5,000. 7 is the number of high schools that I have taught in as a full time social studies teacher and administrator. 39, the number of years that I taught, going back to March of 1978 and concluding in June of 2017. 5,000, and this is just a ballpark, the number of students that I've taught over those high school students that I've taught over those 39 years. So that's what this is about, and I'm just gonna kind of jump right in at the beginning, which for me started out at St. John's University as a student in the School of Education. And that first week, the dean of the School of Education brought in all the new ed students and told us all. This was in 1972. Told us all that when we graduate in 1976, there won't be any jobs for us. And that was kind of not what I was wanting, what I was wanting to hear. But it was turned out to be very prescient because when I graduated in 1976, the New York City Board of Education had actually laid off a couple of thousand teachers, which it had never done before or since. Now, that might have discouraged some of my fellow classmates. It didn't really discourage me. I wanted to be a high school social studies teacher, and I was going to pursue that against apparently all odds. So, my teaching really begins with my student teaching experience, and that was at Newtown High School, the Newtown High School Annex, which was a converted bowling alley in Elmhurst, Queens, right on the Horace Harding Expressway, just off of 108th Street, and that's where I began. And my first couple of weeks as a student teacher, I was able to observe my cooperating teacher, who was an outstanding teacher. John Pumari was his name, and he was just really terrific. And it was really to my benefit to observe him throughout the semester, but certainly that's those first couple of weeks. And we discussed lesson planning and structure and classroom management and all those kinds of things. And then he told me, okay, Tony, you're ready. I'm gonna give you my first period class, and the plan would be that I would teach that class, and then we were free the next period. We'd kind of sit together and go over it, and it would be we'd have selected the topic. Obviously, he would do that we were going to cover, and then he would do the lesson the way he wanted to do the lesson in the subsequent periods, and I could kind of see the difference and try to hone my skills. So that first lesson, I prepared that for days, getting that first lesson ready, and it's a 40 minute period. And it came to class, took it that to the front of the room. The kids looked kind of, ooh, what's this new guy going to be like? and took the attendance, did everything I'm supposed to do, flipped over the Delaney cards. I'll talk about them later, and began my lesson at 9 o'clock. At 9:05, I was done. So I came up somewhat short, and I looked to the back of the room at John, and he was just grinning ear to ear. Kids were raising their hands. They were great. They were asking questions, and I was trying to kind of answer them and work off of that, and so on and so forth. And it was just an absolute disaster. It couldn't have gone. I don't think it could have gone worse. And he let me kind of twist in the wind for about 10 minutes in front of the room, and then he came up and he took over. And then I'm saying, well, okay, this is what I should have been doing. So my first student teaching experience, and that was in the spring of 1976, uh, to say the least, did not go as I had hoped. But things did get better after that. Uh, I then graduated, and as the dean had told me 4 years earlier, I wasn't going to find a job. I sent out resumes to at least 100 different schools. Public schools on Long Island. I didn't bother looking in New York City. Maybe that was an error. I didn't bother looking in New York City because they had just laid off 2,000 or so teachers. Sent out those resumes, got not a single bite, not an interview, nothing. So plan B was go back to school, work on my master's, and I worked at the Catholic Interracial Council in Manhattan as a research associate for about 6 months until that grant that the position was funded by evaporated. So I'm in graduate school. I'm a graduate assistant, a research assistant in the sociology department at St. John's. And one day I just went down to the education office, the placement office, just to look on the bulletin board and see if there was anything there. This is way before the time of the internet and doing searches online and all that kind of stuff. This was looking newspapers and the bulletin board at the placement office, and I saw a little index card that had needed social studies teacher leave replacement at Dominican Commercial High School. Dominican Commercial High School is an all-girls Catholic high school in Jamaica, Queens, walking distance from the house I grew up in. Dominican Commercial High School was a school that my friends and I went to for dances during high school, and we had a lot of fun there, and got into a little bit of trouble, but not too much. In any event, they gave a phone number to call. I called. I spoke to Sister Margaret Mary, I believe her name was, and we had a little bit of a conversation. She asked me to send in a resume. I sent in the resume. She called me back within a few days and said, "We'd like you to come in and do a demonstration lesson." Oh boy, on what? And interestingly enough, as I'm recording this shortly after the November 2020 presidential election, the topic was the Electoral College. So okay, fine. This is a junior class, American history and government, and the topic was the Electoral College. So fine. So I spend days and days preparing a lesson on the Electoral College, explaining what it is, how it works, historical examples of the Electoral College in action, and so forth. I've got books. Remember, there's no internet. There are no smart boards. It's just chalk and maps, and that's what you have to work with. So I went in, had all sorts of books with information highlighted to use and so forth, and I get in front of the class. It's all girls. These are at the time. This is 1978. in March. So I'm 23, and I'm standing there in front of a group of like about 30, I guess, uh, 16, 17-year-old girls. And the lesson went great. I mean, they were like enthralled. Oh, this is so interesting. Hands are raised. We're interacting, going back and forth. The lesson couldn't have gone better. I was so proud of myself that I was able to get up there and keep their attention and so forth. And of course, looking back, I was a 23-year-old man in a building filled with about 1,000, teenage girls, and I think there was four other men in the whole building. So it was going to be too difficult to keep their attention. But in any event, the lesson went very well. I then get the principal then calls me in to discuss the position with her, and she's most interested. And one of the things she was interested in is whether or not I was married. This is Sister Mary Ryan. And I was. We had just gotten married in July of 1977. So I've been married for about, I guess, was that about 9 months or so. So yeah, sister, I'm absolutely, I'm oh good, because we were really hesitant to have young single men in the building. So I said that's fine. She then said your program would be teaching the U.S. history, which you did your demonstration lesson in, and the other courses you'll be teaching are Afro-Asian culture. Afro-Asian culture. Would you be comfortable teaching? Oh, of course, I'd be very comfortable teaching that. I had no idea. Never studied any of this. Never took a course in it in school. I don't think we studied it even when I was in. We might have when I was in high school, freshman year in high school. But my freshman high school teacher was actually a gym teacher who was kind of forced to teach freshman social studies. So I really knew nothing, very little about the topic. But oh yes, sister, absolutely. I'd love to teach that. So I got the job at Dominican Commercial. Uh, very excited. Finally, I graduated in 76. This is now March of 78. So it took me almost 2 years to find a full-time teaching position, even though it was a leave replacement. The woman was on maternity leave, and she was planning to come back the following January. So I would have the position from March through June, and then September through January. So my very first day at Dominican Commercial High School, I walk and the girls had to wear uniforms, skirts and blouses. I don't know if they wore any kind of sweater or anything, but it was skirts and blouses. And I walk in the building, and if you can imagine, I'm looking down a hallway that has lockers on either side. And there are, I don't know, 100, 200 girls lined up at the lockers getting ready for first period. And what are they doing? They're taking off their jeans, which they wore to school, because they had to wear skirts. So I look down the hallway, and all I see are these teenage girls, bent over from the waist, pulling down their, and I'm like, oh my God. I didn't realize they had their skirts on. And they were just slipping off their pants, and their skirts were. But I got my hand. Oh my God! I can't look at it. And I'm just thinking, I might get fired, arrested, and divorced all in the same day. This is not what I had planned on. But obviously, that was not none of those things transpired. It was just me kind of understanding what was going on. But that was my first day, and from there, things at Dominican Commercial High School went very well. I mean, the girls were lovely. They were a lot of fun. I just really enjoyed my experience. The colleagues that I worked with were terrific. I'll talk about them at some later point. And I do remember very vividly my last day at Dominican Commercial, which was in the end of January, in I guess now was 1979, and the girls were just my students were just in tears and they were coming up to me at the end of class, hugging me, and so we're gonna miss you. Oh, so and I was all, what's the word, verklempt, I guess is the word. But that was Dominican commercial. That was a terrific experience. So after I leave Dominican commercial, I finished my master's degree in that spring semester of 1979, and I get my first, I guess you'd call it tenure track position, uh, in in the spring of 79 to start in September of 1979. And I was gonna be teaching at St. Mary's Boys High School. So I was going from an all girls Catholic high school in Jamaica, Queens, to an all boys Catholic high school in Manhasset in Nassau County. And so again, I was thrilled that I got a regular full-time social studies appointment to go teach at St. Mary's. It wasn't too much of a commute. I was living in Hollis, Queens at the time, so it was a short ride. It was just perfect. Uh, and I have a number of stories that I want to talk about at from my years at St. Mary's, which was from 1979 through June of 1986, was my stop at St. Mary's. But I do remember one thing in particular that I'll share at this point. Um, we as teachers all think that our students are just going to be so engaged in our lessons and just their attention, and we're going to keep them riveted throughout the 40 minutes. So I'm teaching a freshman class, Afro-Asian cultures, and apparently one of my students in the back of the room, he was in the first row on the opposite side of the windows, right along the wall where the classroom doors were. And apparently he fell asleep, and I didn't notice. The bell rings, ends the class. I had another class, a senior class coming in the next period in that same room. And at the time, I was a heavy smoker. So the faculty room was a short distance from my classroom. So the bell would ring, I would burst out. I'd be the first one out the door, get to the faculty room so I could take a few drags on a cigarette, and then come back to class. And then when I would come back to class, it was a senior class in sociology. And they're seniors. They were usually a little rambunctious in the classroom. I would settle them down, and everything would be fine. We go on with the lesson. I walk in that day, and they are in silence. And I walked in, and one of the kids looked at me, and he goes, "Shh." So what's going on? And they point to the back of the room, and there's this freshman from the last period, and he's asleep. He's got his head down on the desk like this, face down on the desk, and he's sound asleep. Now, the bell rang to end the class. He's still asleep. All the kids left the room. He's still asleep. The bell rings to start the next period. Oh, excuse me, all the seniors come, bounding in, and he's still asleep. The bell rings to start the next period. He's still asleep. So I tell a kid sitting next to him, I said, "Wake him up." So he shakes him, and the kid doesn't move. I'm thinking, oh my God, I literally bored this kid to death. I said, wake him up. So the kid really shakes him, and the kid wakes up. And if you can imagine, what somebody's face looks like when they're pressed up against a window, and your face is all kind of squished. Well, he was face down on the desk, so he gets up, and that's exactly what his face looked like. Looked like he was pushing it up against a window. The seniors go hysterical laughing. The kid jumps out of his seat. I don't think he really knew where he was. It took him a few seconds to kind of get his bearings, and then he just bolted out the door, and the class was just roaring in laughter. So that's one of my anecdotes, I guess you'd say, from St. Mary's Boys High School. The kid who I thought I actually bored to death. Fortunately, that was not the case. St. Mary's was, as far as I was a young teacher, I was in my 20s when I started there, and the faculty was all pretty young, all male, all pretty young guys in their 20s and 30s for the most part, and that's because you didn't get paid much at St. Mary's, and most teachers didn't stay there very long. You'd stay there for a few years, and then you'd look to move on to something else that's a little bit more lucrative. So in any event, they had this schedule that was kind of interesting, the calendar, I guess you would say, and the seniors would graduate on Memorial Day weekend. So the seniors would be all finished. We'd have final exams for them and so forth. They'd be all done by the second or third week in May. The seniors were finished. They were out of the building. If you taught seniors, and I did at that time, I was teaching, 3 senior classes. You didn't have anything to do. You were free. So we would all go down into the gym, during senior gym classes, or classes that were mostly seniors or what have you, and we would play basketball. This is during the school day. And one of the games we used to play with the guys who were the basketball coaches, and we're playing a game called 21. You might be familiar with that. You get a shot in, go to the foul line, shoot from the foul line. Once you get to 20 points, then you go to the top of the key, and you got to shoot from the top of the key. You get it in, you win. So we used to play that a lot. And this particular day we're playing, and I guess there were juniors who were also mixed into the class. So there was about maybe 25 or so juniors who were sitting in the bleachers waiting for the period to end. And so I'm playing and I'm doing pretty well. I'm hitting shots. I'm knocking down the free throws. I get to the top of the key when I got to 20 points, and I put the shot up. As the shot is up in the air, the bell rings, ending the period, and then of course the shot goes swish right through, and the kids loved it. They're screaming, "Ah!" It was a pretty exciting moment. I didn't have much of an athletic career, but that was perhaps my highlight. I got lots of stories about St. Mary's that I'll be talking about at a later point. This whole project might go on for many hours, although this video won't. I'm just kind of going over the broad stroke. So I go from St. Mary's to Newtown High School. Newtown High School is a New York City public high school. It's where I did my student teaching. I did my student teaching in the annex, and then I got hired to teach in the main building, which is in Elmhurst, Queens. The building itself goes back to the 19th century. It was originally built in the 1890s. The main part of the building, which you might see if you drive along the Long Island Expressway, get around 108th Street and look north, you'll see a tower, a bell tower. That's the Newtown High School tower. So anyway, I get a job at Newtown High School. It's my first public school job after having taught the year at Dominican Commercial, and I guess it was 7 years at St. Mary's, and now I'm going to Newtown High School. I was educated all Catholic schools, Catholic elementary school, Catholic high school, St. John's University for my bachelor's degree and for my master's degree. So all Catholic high schools, all Catholic schools, I should say. So Newtown is my first real regular job in a public school, and one of the things that struck me at first was the difference in building maintenance. Dominican Commercial, St. Mary's, the Catholic schools that I attended as a student were kept immaculately clean. Immaculately clean. Over the summer, everything was emptied out of every classroom. Teachers were told not to leave anything in the desks or what have. Take all your stuff home because everything's getting cleaned. And then every day, the building would be cleaned after school. And at St. Mary's, one of the things they would do, and they did this at Dominican Commercial as well, is they would wash the blackboards, clean off the chalk ledge, and at St. Mary's, they would put a brand new piece of chalk, one piece of chalk, brand new piece of chalk, right on the chalk ledge. And of course, the erasers were cleaned as well. I go to Newtown, and that first class, I go to pick up a piece of chalk, and you can't even see the chocolate. It was just completely buried under chalk dust, and you had to kind of look around to find a little piece of chalk that you could use. So that was kind of surprising. Uh, First class I'm teaching, I see a kid. He's writing on a desk. Now, Catholic high schools. I mean, that was major infraction. So I start screaming at this kid. What are you doing? You can't write on the desk. That's not your desk. You can't write on that desk. That's terrible. And I go down and take a look at what this kid's writing on the desk. And I look at the kid's desktop, and it was like it had archaeological significance. I mean, there's writing on the desk. Joe was here, 1956, and stuff like that. I'm screaming at this poor kid for writing on a desk that's just covered with writing and so. So it was the little kinds of things that happened that were just like a kind of a shock to my system, because reminding me that there are real differences between Catholic schools and public schools. Some of them subtle, some of them not so subtle, but the maintenance thing was something that kind of struck me initially. I was at a classroom that I was in for a couple of periods in the day, so I wanted to use that desk to keep some stuff and what have you. I remember opening up the desk drawers, and they were loaded with materials, papers and files, and so I figured this teacher just didn't take their stuff home, but they must have left. I just threw everything out. 5 minutes later, a teacher comes in. Oh, I want to get something out of the desk. Oh, sure, go ahead, take a look. It was all gone. So this was really a kind of a shock to me in that sense. Another thing that was kind of surprising. I was given a homeroom, and I should point out that Newtown High School has over 100 different ethnic groups represented in their student body. 5,000 students, as I mentioned, over 100 different ethnic groups. That part of Queens, Elmhurst, Corona in Queens, is is I would imagine the most diverse place on the planet in terms of the numbers of different kinds of immigrant groups that have settled in Elmore. So a lot of the kids I was teaching were either immigrant kids, or they were the children of immigrants. Many of them, not all, but many of them. In any event, the homeroom I was given was all Asian immigrant kids, mostly from China, but you also had some from South Asia, you had some from Korea, and so forth. So, first thing I have to do is call the roll. Simple thing to do. Take attendance the first day of homeroom. So, I'm looking at the roll, and they're all Asian names. And of course, I'm going to butcher every one of these names, I'm sure, because when I was teaching at St. Mary's or Dominican Commercial, all the kids were, white kids, Irish, Italian, Polish. It was just an extension of what I was used to, the people that I kinds of people I grew up with, and so forth. So uh, I read the first kid's name. I forget what it was, but I read the first kid's name, and nobody raises their hand. Okay, so this kid's absent, so I mark the kid absent. I call the next kid's name, and 10 hands go up. I said, wait a second, this can't be right. So now I have to go around to each kid with the list and say, who are you? Which one are you? So that was something like I've never experienced before. And I had that homeroom all year. I was at Newtown for 2 years. I had that homeroom all year. They gave me that same group of kids again the following year, and they just became one of my favorite groups of students. Were those that Asian immigrant homeroom that I had. I'll probably talk more about those kids later, because they were just wonderful. One of the things you're going to hear me saying a lot is that those kids were wonderful. Those kids were wonderful. And that's the kind of a recurring theme throughout the 39 years I spent in high school. Those kids were wonderful. And I don't care if they were white kids, black kids, Asian kids, Jewish kids, Catholic kids, rich kids, poor kids, middle class kids. They were all, with very few exceptions, just terrific kids. One kid that again, pointing out the differences between the Catholic schools that I taught in and Newtown High School, was a girl I'll never forget. Her name was Tracy Litsky. Tracy Litsky was in one of my freshman classes, and I remember. And when I see students that I haven't seen in years, I might not remember their names, but I kind of remember where they sat in class. Tracy Litsky sat in the second row, second seat. Second row's over by the doors. The last row's over by the windows. Second row, second seat, and we're about 2 or 3 weeks into the semester, and she's not handed in homework assignments. So that's horrible as far as I'm concerned. So I tell Tracy, I said, Tracy, you haven't handed in any homeworks. See me before you leave class. Very stern teacher voice. See me before you leave class. So I confront her. I said, Tracy, why are you not handing in homework? Don't you realize if you don't do your homework, you're going to fail the course? And she said, oh, Mr. Scarnati, I'm very sorry. I'm going to try to do better. But, I just moved from the foster home that I was in over the summer into a new foster home now. And I haven't had time to really get adjusted. And I just felt this big. Here I am admonishing a student for not doing her homework when I should be congratulating her for getting herself to class every day and being a wonderful kid in class every day and trying her best. So I just broke one of my cardinal rules, and that is never touch anybody, never touch any students. And I gave her a hug and I said, Tracy, don't worry about it. Do the best you can, and we'll work through this together somehow, and we'll get you. I'll help get you through this. And so she did fine. And there was no from that point forward, there was no chance that Tracy Litsky was not going to get a passing grade in social studies, and she did. What she got, I don't know. I lost track of her. I don't know what happened to her since. But it kind of put in stark relief for me that you're going to have some different kinds of kids here at in Newtown High School than you had at St. Mary's and at Dominican Commercial. You're not going to have all these middle class kids who grow up in stable households and et cetera, et cetera. You're going to have lots of different kinds of kids, and so that was Tracy Litsky, and I was at Newtown for the 2 years. I left Newtown High School in 1988 I was at Newtown from 86 to 88. 88, I go to Holy Trinity High School, back to the Catholic school, where I was going to be assistant principal, dean of students at Holy Trinity High School, which is in Hicksville, also in Nassau County. I thought maybe I'd be a good administrator. I thought maybe I would like being an administrator. And, that's like the next step. I learned in very short order that this was not for me. This was absolutely not for me. It was like having a regular job. There was no teaching involved. I'm dealing with problems all day long. I'm there from 8 in the morning to 4 in the afternoon, and it's nothing but problems that I have to, this kid's in trouble here, this kid's in trouble there, this teacher's got an issue with this kid. It's constant problems. I guess the one that shows the craziness of it, as far as I was concerned, I walk into work one morning at 7:45, 7:30, 7:45, something like that. I would get in a little bit early, and there's a kid sitting in the office waiting for me. What do you need? He said, well, the bus driver's not going to let anybody off the bus until the dean comes out. Oh, what? This is the first. So now I got to deal with, the teachers wanting me to do stuff. I got to deal with, of course, the other administrators wanting me to do stuff. I got to deal with parents who want me to do stuff. I got to deal with these kids, and now I got to deal with a bus driver too. So I go out to the bus. This is the Amityville bus. I get on the bus. I said, "What's going on? Why won't you let the kids off the bus?" And he said they were yelling and screaming. They were acting like a bunch of animals. And I told him I'm not letting them off the bus until the dean comes out here and lets them know they can't behave like this. So now I have to yell at a busload of kids in order to get them off the bus. When in retrospect, I should have just told the kid who said the bus driver won't let the kids off the bus to go back to the bus driver and say, "Fine, do it. You want to keep them all day? Keep them all day." But no, I went out there, did what I was supposed to do, scream at these kids, and then march them back into school. So stuff like that all day long. I was not. It was not for me. So I'm there for 1 year, 1988 through June of 1989, and then I get what the job that I had been trying to get for a long time uh, at Townsend Harris High School. Townsend Harris High School is in Flushing, Queens. It's affiliated with Queens College. It's a school, not one of the test schools like Stuyvesant. We have to take a test to get in, but it's competitive to get in, and you're going to get top students in there, and you're going to be working in conjunction with faculty, perhaps at Queens College. And at the time, I was taking my doctoral classes, and I thought this would be just a wonderful fit. But they were open for a couple of years before I was able to get a position there. But come that 1989, I got the job at Townsend Harris, and I immediately was confronted with jargon that I had never heard before. Uh, Cafetorium? What in the world is a cafetorium? It's a cafeteria essentially that has a stage because it's also an auditorium, but it's much more than that. Classes were taught in the cafetorium. It would be divided, and you would have two different classes going on. I did what they called enrichment, and I had an enrichment group that I worked with in the cafetorium. I at one point was on the stage in the cafetorium selling Regents Review books to raise money for one of my teams, and of course my fencing team, which I'm going to talk about in a later point. The fencing team, uh, when we started, that's where we fenced. We fenced not in the gym, but in the cafetorium. So the cafetorium was this multi-purpose room. And I had never heard even the word before, and I tell you the truth, I haven't heard it since. A cafetorium. The other thing that jargon that I learned was ephebic oath. The ephebic oath. Never heard of this. Uh, this goes back to ancient Greece, and it was an oath that the ninth graders at Townsend Harris all had to kind of stand up and pledge to abide by the ephebic oath, which really is a wonderful thing. It's basic points it makes is that never abandon your comrades uh, in battle, something along those lines. So support the people that you're working with, support them, and that you pledge to make this place better than when you found it. And that struck a chord with me. And that whole notion is really a wonderful thing. And I felt that I had been abiding by the ephebic oath, the different places that I worked at, especially at St. Mary's. I introduced things at St. Mary's that kind of made the school, I thought, better, enhanced the program. And now at Townsend Harris, I kind of took that to heart and did what I could to try to make the place better than when I found it. and I'll talk about some of the things I did there later on as well. But then the third term I learned toward the end of my first year at Townsend Harris was excessed, which I became. Excessed means that your position no longer exists, or we're giving your position to somebody else who has more seniority. So I learned toward the end of the year that I was no longer going to be at Townsend Harris High School. I was being excessed. And a teacher was coming in from August Martin High School, Nancy Lieb, who at that point I hated because she's taking my job from me. We later became best of friends. But in any event, that was the end of my what I thought was my tenure at Townsend Harris High School. And interestingly enough, where did I end up after Townsend Harris High School? Was August Martin High School. So Nancy Lieb and I switched positions. August Martin High School is uh, a working class, all black high school in Jamaica, Queens, not far from Kennedy Airport. Uh, so now I'm going to a very different place. So I went from, all white, middle and upper middle class students in the Catholic schools I taught at to a real mix of kids at Newtown High School, back to the middle class kids at Holy Trinity High School, and then at Townsend Harris, when I started there, for the most part, it was middle class kids who were very good students. And now I'm going to August Martin High School, an all black working class high school. And again, the kids there were wonderful. They were wonderful. But I noticed the difference between the three public schools I was in. At Newtown, a lot of the kids just didn't come to class. Well, they would kind of almost like rotate in. So you would have 34 on your register, and you would rarely have more than 20 kids in the class at any time. The kids just didn't come. Uh, Townsend Harris, everybody came every day. There was hardly any absenteeism. There was I don't know of any real truancy issues at Townsend Harris High School the way you had them at Newtown. But the kids at August Martin were different. They would come to school, but they didn't want to go to class. So you would see them roaming around the building a lot. So there's always kids walking in the hallways during classes because they didn't want to go to class, but they wanted to be in school for whatever reason. So I'm teaching a junior class in American history, and a girl screams out in pain, "Ah!" I said, "What's wrong?" She says, "I got a cramp," and she had a cramp in her hamstring. So I said, "Stand up, move around a little bit, massage it a little bit, it'll go away." And she did, and it did. And she sits back down, and 2 minutes later, the cramp comes back. She jumps out of her seat, screaming in agony. So I said, here's the hall pass. Take this and go walk around the halls for a while until your cramp clears up, until your cramp resolves itself. This was like every kid at August Martin's dream. I didn't realize it when I was saying it. Take the hall pass and go wander the halls. So I give her the pass. She walks out. She walks out of the room, and then within 15 seconds, half the class jumps out of their seats, saying, "Oh, I got a cramp! I got a cramp!" All right, terrific kids. There are other stories about August Martin that will come up. I was at August Martin for 1 year. In the summer of, I guess, I was there 99 for the 90-91 school year. In the summer of 1991, I get a phone call from a former colleague of mine, Mike Manson at Townsend Harris, and he says, "Tony, if you want to come back, you can, because several teachers have retired, and because you were excessed, even though you don't have a lot of seniority, because you were excessed, you go to the top of the list. So if you want to get back in, all you got to do is call the Queen's Superintendent office, tell her you want to go back to Townsend Harris as an excess teacher, and you got the position." I was beyond thrilled. Of course, I didn't hear anything from the Board of Education until the first day of school, which I didn't know I was going to actually get to go back to Townsend Harris. So I reported back to August Martin, and my assistant principal, August Martin, told me, Tony, you're supposed to be at Townsend Harris, but if you want to stay here, that's okay. We can keep it. I said, no. I'll go back. I'll go back to Townsend Harris. So I went back to Townsend Harris, and I did what I could to try and fulfill the ephebic oath, make the place better than I left it, and I developed a social science research program that I'm thrilled that continued on after I had left. We developed what we call the election simulation, which has become really a part of the culture of the school, which I am beyond proud about. So, couple quick little stories about the research program and the election simulation. One, I can remember this: the kids bouncing ideas in social science research of what they wanted to research. And one kid had the brilliant idea that she wanted to research crime rates in New York City, and she wanted to do it by neighborhood. I said, "Oh, that's interesting. You could that data set's available. You could tap into that. Well, what is it that you'd be interested in finding out?" And she said, "I'd like to see what the crime rates are near Dunkin' Donuts." She said, "I believe that there will be a relationship between proximity to a Dunkin' Donuts and crime rates." I said, "Really? Why is that?" She said, "Oh, everybody knows cops like to eat donuts, so you figure there's going to be a police presence throughout the day around Dunkin' Donuts, so I would imagine that the crime rates would be lower." I said, "Wow, that's pretty interesting, but I don't think you're going to be able to get those statistics by Dunkin' Donuts." So it was an interesting idea that never came to fruition. A quick story about the election simulation. How do I even begin this? Kids put up a poster, as they do for different campaigns, and they're campaigning for different candidates. I forget which election this was. And one of the groups, one of the campaigns put up a poster based on the Got Milk ad campaign of the late. This was in the late '90s, and it was a picture of Yasmin Bleeth, who was a very attractive actress, and it was a full-size poster of her in a very scanty, shall we say, swimsuit. And they had their campaign slogan on there, and I forget exactly what it was. But days after it went up, it was gone. It was gone. And so now the issue was, who took this poster down? Because you're not supposed to do that, obviously. And let's get to the bottom of this. And the accusation was that one of the clubs at school, I guess you'd call it a feminist club, Shakespeare's sister, that they took down the poster because they felt it was a sexist poster. They, of course, denied it. No one connected with that club took down that poster, but there were people who absolutely believed that was the case. So we adjudicated it. I also was teaching law classes at the time. So I had 2 law classes. So we're going to have a trial. And we're in the new Townsend Harris building now, which is a spectacular building, and it doesn't have a cafetorium. It has an actual auditorium. So we did the trial in the auditorium. It was during lunch period, so we recruited kids from the who were in lunch to come and serve as jurors, and they sat on stage. They could eat their lunch on stage. I think we gave them some cookies or something as an inducement to do this. And so we ran the trials. We ran the trial. They were accused, and we had defense, prosecutors. Kids served as the judge, and we ran the trial for a couple of days. And sure enough, in one of the trials, Shakespeare's sister was found guilty, and in the other trial, they were acquitted. which is kind of an interesting lesson for my students that who the jurors are and who the attorneys are matters in terms of what the outcome is going to be, because it was the same fact pattern, same basically non-existent evidence, and you got two different results. After we did all this, and had all this controversy going on about the who took this poster, the assistant principal, Malcolm Rossman, comes over to me and says, Tony, I took down the poster. I said, really? Maybe you could have told me that. No, you were handling it. You were handling it. But I took it down because somebody had circled Yasmin Bleeth's nipples that were protruding from the bathing suit. And so I had to take that down because that was not, in my view, appropriate. So crazy kinds of things. But in any event, that was one of many kind of interesting and funny things that happened regarding the election simulation. And then I forget what year it was, but there was a couple of things at Townsend Harris that were kind of interesting. One was the internet was kind of new, and somebody did who's your favorite teacher kind of a thing, and I got quite a few votes. Another young teacher was not getting as many votes, and he was very upset. And he said, "We got to beat Scarnati. I want everybody to vote for me," and he still lost. I don't know if I won, but he still lost. Because if you try to be a teacher that everybody's going to like, you're not going to be a teacher that anybody likes because you're a phony. In any event, that's editorial comment. But toward the end, I think it was 98, but I'm not sure. The senior, they had an office for seniors where they had to sign in and so forth, because they were taking their classes, a lot of classes on the campus still. So they had what they called a secret crush list, where the kids could write if not they're leaving and they're never going to see anybody necessarily again. You could put the person's name that you had a secret crush on, while you were in high school. And a friend of mine came to me, a colleague, John Brown. He said, Tony, you got to go upstairs to the senior office. You got to take a look at this secret crush list. Come on. I'm in no mood. I had some issues going on. He said, Tony, you got to come up and you got to take a look at this list. So, okay. So I go up and take a look at the secret crush list. And there I am, listed, I don't know how many times, several times. And I'm like, what? I had no idea, no clue that any of this was happening. But it just goes to prove 2 points. Number one, the kids are wonderful. High school kids are terrific. That's one. And two, Townsend Harris girls they're pretty smart. I don't know about their taste, but they're pretty smart. Okay. So then my next stop, I leave Townsend Harris because I'm just bowled over by the financial offer that I'm given from Jericho High School, where they're going to pay me a lot more money. And as much as I hated to leave town, I really hated to leave Townsend Harris. I always said that I would end my career there. I would never leave there. But I did. And I left, and I went to Jericho High School, public high school. Jericho is in Nassau County, an affluent Nassau County, part of what's called the Nassau County Gold Coast. So I went to Jericho High School, and I finished my career there. I was there from September of 2000 through June of 2017. And it was at Jericho High School that I became, I don't know if you can read that, I became Lord Scarnati. I think it's shown in reverse. Lord Scarnati. And that's an interesting story, but that's a story for another time. So I'm going to stop here because I thought this would take me about 20 minutes, and I could see it's taken me close to an hour. So I'll be back again with stories that I think I'm going to try to organize by theme. Okay. So Lord Scarnati signing off. So long, everybody.